Hey guys, let's get into it and talk about design. So, what is design? One of the big parts when you're talking about both drawing and writing is design. So, even directors for movies and things like that also need to use design. Obviously, there's interior decorators that use design. Pretty much anyone that is doing something that has a degree of aesthetics has to think about design. And so drawing is just your simple nuts and bolts of uh, being able to do something. So most people, when they start and they start drawing, they do sort of lines like this, where they're just kind of like following the line and they're just moving after that point and just following the line. Well, they're probably not going to be that accurate, to be honest, but they're probably going to follow around, be super fixated on the point that they're drawing at, and then try and move to another part, be super fixated there, move to another part, be super fixated there, and so on. While drawing, you need to learn to use a stroke to be able to do what you're doing. You need to learn that forms are at the backbone of anything that you are drawing. So, you know, forms and perspectives and things like that. So if you're going to create something that has a rectangular form and you remove like a subform of that, I don't know, like let's say something drops back in here for whatever reason, um, and like this and something, I don't even know what that is, but say you specifically need something that has a form like that, then you can subtract like bits and pieces and create like whatever the form is that you specifically need, right? Um, because, and most people, when they're doing drawing, their proportions are going to be off. So, like, when they draw a face, an eye is going to be here, and another eye is going to be here or something. And instead of that looking like a squint, it's just going to look wobbly. And so you need your forms behind things in order to help you inform your proportion, as well as to give three-dimensionality so that things don't just look flat. You also need measurement, which is just being able to coordinate and understand and deconstruct like what ratios things have, use a bit of geometry, figure out like where the eye is meant to be at relative to another piece so that you have a kind of full awareness of what's happening, and then you're able to just control all these features. So drawing is basically control of the medium, which is using the muscles to create strokes rather than doing this thing. Using form so that you have information behind everything that you're drawing, and then using measurement to just tidy things up, get things way more precise, right? So that's the basis of drawing. But what is design? Design is basically what you're going to draw. So you might know how to draw something, but what's the point if you don't know what you're going to draw? So if we're going to draw dice, it's something very simple. You could just say, oh, that's a cube. I can draw a cube. Uh, woo, we've got a cube. Yeah, boom, I got a cube. It's done. We're a little bit above it here, so woo, there we go. And then, I'll just say that's the 5 side. Boom. And this is like a 3 side. I actually don't know how the dice are worked, but like the faces, like what they have on the faces, whether they have like the odds on those things or whether they alternate, I don't know. And that would be something that you'd want to check if you were actually drawing a dice. But if you're going to design it, you don't just do any random stock standard dice, you would start making some decisions. So what are some possible decisions that we could make about dice? We've obviously got different views of perspective. So we can look at it from above, we can look at it from below, we can look at it so like push it off to the side of our view um, in some direction. So for example, is the dice on a table? Are we like sitting over here, looking at it sort of across this way? Because if we are, and there's going to be a specific perspective, well, that is going to be applying to this dice. So you're going to have to figure that out. Okay, so our audience is back here, and so we're obviously going to be seeing a bit less of it here. I'm just wondering where the vanishing point would go to. Let's just say it's somewhat back like that. And maybe like this. This is a really big dice, really big dice. But you're above it, so you'd be seeing a bit of the top. It's across from you off to the left, so you'd also be seeing a bit of the side, unless we were to rotate the dice. If we were to rotate the dice, it could be that it's sort of a bit more like we're not going to see the side of the dice, but we're going to see like something more, I don't know, like this, and maybe we're gonna, I don't know. I confuse myself. So you can make these questions with perspective as to what you're going to do when you're looking at the dice. Is it going to be below? Is it going to be above? Are you going to bevel the edges? What kind of stylization are you going to use to show the bevels of these edges? Are you going to do it with line art, or are you going to do it with shading? Is there going to be what kind of texture are you going to put on these dice? What kind of level of information is necessary? Are you just going to have dice that have like the normal 5 and 3 and 1 and all that sort of stuff on it? Or are you going to put like little weird symbols on it which have like magical symbols or something on it? And what kind of magical symbols does your thing use? So if a writer would look at this and they'd say, oh, okay, that's like world building, where you decide the ideas and how you're going to represent them. And this is definitely true in drawing. So when you're doing a design, you're not only just considering the aesthetics of something, you're also considering things like position, and what that does, how that changes what you're drawing, because then it's not going to be literally the same. It's going to change certain things of it. You're going to think about things that change the representation. You're going to be changing things that alter the style. So aesthetics might be something like the way that I like my dice to be is to have like a little shine on them, or like them to be colored, or there to be a very smooth metallic texture across them, or uh, that it be a specific size compared to like other objects on the table. Um, like there's some other object on the table, I don't know what it is, whatever. And I want there to be a relationship of like thirds to this somehow, so that it looks more aesthetic. So this is 3 times as long, and it's like 1/3 as wide or something. So, you're like, oh, okay, so now there's like some kind of consideration of uh, like composition or something like that connected with the aesthetics. Position, you're just going to think about the perspective and how it's changed if you've shifted it off somewhere. Like you're going to see it from the side there, you're going to see it front on here, you're going to see it from somewhat above if it's below you. Um, so you have to think about how the position has changed it. So for example, if it's behind something or whatever, that's going to also change its position. Representation, this is, um, so for example, if it's a dark room or it's a light room or it's a room with a lot of color, um, what is the general scene that this is placed in, and how is that going to change the way that the dice look? Like, are there going to be reflections in the environment because it's super bright and it's like metal dice? Because then that's going to change how you're going to have to represent these dice. It's gonna have like that metal, that sort of darker sheen where there's those strikes through it. This is way too big. Sorry. Where you'll have like those metallic sort of strikes through it. That's not even close to metallic looking. Alright, whatever. And I made that minuscule. Alright, so I don't know. When something's metallic, it tends to have like more contrast. Um, yeah. Well, anyways, and then it might get reflections and stuff on it. So, like a person looking at it or something might have a bit of a shadow in the form or whatever. So, and then you've got style. So maybe the style of the idea of your dice is just to have them like actually kind of wobbly or something. Like this is how I draw dice in this world. It's like it's wobbly because the guy that's looking at it is super high. And so maybe this is turning uh, into a face or something. I don't know. Whatever you're doing in your designs, you just have to consider that there are many ways to represent something that may essentially seem as simple as just dice. And if you don't ask the questions of what you really want and why, you're never going to get to the bottom of what the design should be and um, why you're going to, what's going to be necessary in the drawing. And if you don't have a design, this becomes useless. It's kind of like having a paddle for a boat, but not knowing where you're going to go. So normally you just might be in the river and you're on your boat and you can't paddle anywhere because you can't draw. But even given a paddle, uh, you just don't know where to go unless you start asking questions about design. And that is ultimately the idea that you want to get better at as you're drawing. Um, and there's a few principles that a lot of people talk about in design, which is uh, big, medium, small. There's things for composition like the thirds. Um, which are really basic, but basically, if you're making something like, oh, it's gun, I don't know, whatever. Um, you would have a big section, and maybe you'd have like a medium section, and maybe you'd have like some smaller element section on it. Whatever. This is terrible, and it's not really a gun, but whatever. So, mm, that's like that's split. This is split here directly in half, which wouldn't be good. So you maybe want to push that to a third or something like that. And then make it more medium. And you don't want this size to be the same as this size. So you'd have to, so like, well, what is this ratio? This is this ratio and this ratio. You could take it sort of here at like a 1.5 sort of ratio there. So maybe with creating your idea, you just go through whatever whatever is the big element, the small element, and the medium element, and you create your specific design, whatever it is. And let's just say that's actually some sort of hatchet or whatever. I don't know. So maybe there's like some sort of air release thing. I don't know. But say you're just thinking big, medium, small, you're thinking sort of thirds, or you might be thinking also in golden ratio, like 1.6, just to kind of give you some ideas to push around and to play with to see if you can come up with something that seems aesthetic. Like that doesn't necessarily look aesthetic at all, but um, it's something to play around with. But also when you're considering design, and this is what I especially think on, is I think about a world, and let's just represent that as a box. World as a box. Ooh. If you have an empty box, you might think, oh, anything is possible then. I can create anything, and it'll be amazing. But if it's a completely empty box, a complete void, you actually can't create that much. You can only create the very first thing that pops to your head. So you're there, you're thinking, and you're considering what to do. You're like, what do I do? I don't know. And yeah, you don't know. You're just trying to get some things done, and you can't figure it out because you haven't got anything happening already. So if I'm going to design a scene in a story or something like that, I start to think of what are the most fascinating, interesting things, ways I can make this world rich and cool and interesting. So let's say we're making a fight scene. Most people would say a fight scene, let's make it in a coliseum, make the coliseum just like have some chairs, have like a front row, and have the contestants standing at one point in the Colosseum and another point in the Colosseum. And here we go. We've got two people ready to fight. And so they just kind of like pass everything off when it comes to design to tropes or something really easy to describe. And that's all they've got, which is better than nothing. It's better to have that kind of idea um, set up already, so that then when you come along and you're trying to design a bit more, you can say, but what are the special features of this Colosseum or whatever? But you can also think, what are other places to fight? Is the Colosseum the best choice for this fight? It could actually be the hallway of the Colosseum that they actually fight in. Why? Maybe that's connected to some sort of story decision where the fight, actually, the real fight or the interesting fight, doesn't happen in front of everyone else where you'd expect, but it happens in this dingy corner or maybe in a back room somewhere, where you've got a locker room or something like that. So someone's talking about the fight they just had and tells them they're no good, and then all of a sudden, bam! There's just an explosion in this room, which then causes this to like this is like an explosion that comes out of here, like tons of magic or something. And so maybe all the people look over, like, huh? What? What's happening? What just happened there? And so as soon as you've got some sort of idea that makes this Colosseum more interesting, now you can start to consider, well, what is actually happening here? Like, who who's going to notice? Why are they going to notice? What's going to make that scene where they all look over, like, whoa? What's going to make that interesting? Is it going to be that there's a hot dog vendor who's over here, who's been talking to some people, and maybe it's been in the background or something, and maybe he like drops a hot dog or something, and he drops some money, and then he like rushes down to grab that money and pick it up, and so he ends up so that his face is right next to this, um, and maybe then after he almost gets scorched, loads of hot dogs just fall down, and sort of he gets a hot dog avalanche because everyone's dropped what they're eating, and he's just left like wondering what's just happened. So what are you going to do? How are you going to sculpt multiple components, like multiple angles on this to make it interesting? And that's basically what you do when you're drawing as well, is you want to think about the multiple elements that can make it interesting. Like you might say, how is the room making this dice interesting? Because dice are normally boring. In a plain illuminated room, say like under fluorescent light, that's super boring. But under candlelight, maybe that's more interesting, because it's going to give it more colors and hues and so on. But maybe you're like, I don't like candlelight. That's weird. So maybe you go, oh, maybe it's like a magical crystal light. Oh, wow, that like makes it more interesting. And maybe you're like, I don't like magical crystal light. Like maybe what it is it's actually a cat's eye. A cat is seeing this cube. Like he's looking at it in the dark. And how would that change it? Maybe it's like more green. Um, so you might have many different questions as to how you're going to represent something just based on the lighting scheme. Or you might have it just based on the perspective scheme. Like what's the most interesting perspective to look at a dice from? And say if I was writing this for a story, it would depend on the story. So if I have a gambler who's playing dice, they're probably going to have a reverence for the dice, a sort of wonder, and um, thinking that there's some sort of divine intervention that's going to happen. So maybe I want to influence something around the dice to represent some sort of holy imagery. So, for example, we looked previously at Da Vinci's Last Supper, and there was Jesus in the middle, while everyone else was arguing after he said, like, one of you is going to betray me or whatever. And there was a table, and here there was light coming through, while there was perspective grids on the ceiling or whatever, and then perspective grids coming away. And you got this table or whatever that's coming out here, and maybe as he's throwing the dice or something, uh, you can see like there's this bright light above him, and then maybe you turn and you've got his hands that are letting of the dice, and they're going bump, 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 or whatever. And you get another scene where the dice is spinning or whatever. I don't know how to represent that, but and then the dice eventually lands, and there is something to do with this reflection, or maybe his shadow. His shadow is like looming above it or something. And as the dice lands, there is like a flash of light around this part of it. So we'd represent that by darkening. Ugh. Darkening. So there'd be like flashes of light around whatever's happening here, and maybe flashes of light around something that's, or maybe flashes of light along the edges, that, and maybe a ray, like some sort of ray coming down across it that is then hitting down and creating like some sort of strange shadow form here or whatever. I don't know. He's got like this shadow form. And so this, for whatever reason, now is made more interesting by the fact of the scene and the setting and the light choices and so on. So that would be an element of design. All right. Other things considering design is just that the more information that you have in that box, I know we put like the Colosseum or whatever, the more information you have in that box, the more you can remove and chisel away. So you had that Colosseum or whatever, great. And you had this, great. And you had like a hot dog vendor that's creating hot dogs, whatever. And he can fall down, and this explosion in the back room, whatever, great. The moment you have those ideas, the moment you can start to question them. Do I really want to do it in a back room? Do I want something to come out the hallway? Do I want the hot dog vendor? Do I want the people in the stands to be the big moment of this scene? What are some other versions I could use of the audience? Maybe I could use it as like destruction of this entryway to the Colosseum, so then they can't have their battle. So then these people aren't important. Instead, what's important is that broken entryway. And maybe there's someone like a little manager who's like, "Hey, what are you doing? Why did you just like destroy the entryway to the Colosseum? We can't fight now. This is like, how dare you?" Rah. So maybe that is part of the design idea. So you just want, and you also want to change this up. So instead of a coliseum for the fight, you might also want to consider like a different location. Like maybe it is outside on a cliff. So we've got a cliffside or something, and they're fighting on this cliffside. Whatever. This is going to add stakes to the fight, obviously, because there's a cliff. But if this is a small cliff, there's not much stakes. There is a tactical component to it. If there is a river, that sort of like keys in like this may be a way out of the fight for someone because they might like end up in the water, or it could be a massive disadvantage that makes it a terrible thing to fall into if they had some sort of capability to exploit this, like for example a bow and arrow or something, and then they're having to hold their breath underwater in order to avoid it. Or maybe it's like a big animal comes along and like knocks them both off and they land in the water. Or maybe this is lava and then they're going to have to fight and avoid lava, like they did in Revenge of the Sith. Yeah, like in Star Wars, where they're fighting on lava and they're moving to different locations and so on. So you can add stakes or risks or danger using this environment. And then the environmental design, you're going to have to think about it like, okay, if I am jumping into the idea of lava, then what am I going to do with lava? What's going to make the lava interesting? Because right now it's just there's lava, which is okay, but you'd have to think about what makes lava have more stakes. And I think what would make lava have more stakes is you'd have to ask, why are they even here? Why did they end up next to lava? How does that make any sense? And why would anyone get in a fight near lava? No one would do that by choice, right? It might be that they're just by a lava factory for whatever reason because that's where they meet them. But that's kind of a poor explanation as to why you'd have lava. So, if the lava is there after a cataclysm that's just occurred, say there's been a mountain that's erupted due to something else, and this is causing a lot of conflict in the environment, then all of a sudden you could have continuing eruptions that are causing boulders and things to land on them. And maybe it's not just lava that's dangerous here. Maybe there's like remnants of pyroclastic flow and smoke and uh, dangerous fumes and such like that, you know, or maybe there's even statuesque people after a pyroclastic flow where they're frozen in time because they're basically ash and rock now. And maybe there's like a field of people with just like in Pompeii, because the pyroclastic flows came after, and then there's these rivers of lava, and then you would have to ask the question, how much of this lava is going to be active if it's after the time that the thing has erupted? Obviously there's going to be parts of it that are just black, and there's going to be thinner streams of lava if it's not the main flow. And then you'd still have to answer the question of why they're up there, even though that's all interesting. What is the part that has no information, that has no backdrop? You have to design that. You have to say, okay, well, what is the reason that they'd be specifically on this cliff? You could say it's because they had a goal to get somewhere and they got interrupted on the way. You could say they were trying to get somewhere and like one of these boulders blew up their means of transportation, and then that meant that someone caught up to them. Um, or maybe they were trying to fix their means of transportation, and some rabid person trying to save their own life comes and wants the keys to their vehicle. Um, and then all of a sudden, they kind of step back from the road to kind of like gauge this person's intent, and then all of a sudden look back and are like, oh no, there's like lava and like fields of dead people and rocks and boulders are coming down from here. And now you've got a more interesting design of something happening. So whenever I think of design, I think of it in just canvases. Just think of it as a canvas. So this this canvas is blank. And if it's blank, you can't tell a story until you fill up each component that is blank with something interesting. Until you give it something interesting, it's not designed. It's not a design until you make something interesting. So if it's perspective, if you're just saying, I just want normal flat perspective, it's in the middle of the page, and my character is just in a medium shot. That's it. They're in a medium. Okay, so a medium shot is down to the hips, right? Um, so I want the character here. It's just going to be middle of the road. I'll have it at eye level, and they'll be in the center of the thing, and they'll just be speaking. Okay, well, your perspective is not designed. There's no interesting aspect to it. So a lot of people, they might say, okay, what I'm going to do to redesign this is we'll just change this and we'll change the shot type. So there is a medium shot, but we're going to have an over the shoulder shot here where this person's talking or doing something, and maybe there's something like that. But is this designed yet? Not really. So you want to go through enough questions on perspective until it becomes lively and interesting. So what could we do to a casual shot like this that has, two people speaking? And it depends. Like, are they joking? Are they having fun with each other? Are they enemies? Because, obviously, if they're an enemy, you can have like a power differential. So, you could be standing over them and they could be underneath you. And that makes it a little more interesting, but it's not amazing. Um, but maybe there's an element of perspective that you can use to help you. So maybe you're saying, oh, there's going to be an object behind the person that's weaker. Then you say, like, that's not a very good way to describe it with this perspective. What if we were to create some kind of vanishing point to like this hazard or something? Like there's some specific hazard, and then maybe the smaller person is here, I don't know, like here or whatever, and then there is the larger person doing something here, so that you've got a sort of direct line that's sort of ending up to this thing, and maybe the perspective, this is way above, and you can somehow see more into this chasm or hole or something. And now you're starting to see like, oh, this is actually more interesting now, rather than completely undesigned and that sort of stuff. So if you draw without design, basically it's just not going to be as interesting. So design is just about asking all the questions that you need to around what you're doing to make it interesting and to make it aesthetic as well. So, aesthetics, you can just look around and see. Even abstract art can help you, because you can look at aesthetic abstract art and say like, oh, well, I like that design for this thing. And it's going to depend highly on the context of what you're drawing and what you're trying to tell, or like what story you're trying to tell, is going to give you more clues on what you need to find and how you need to solve the problem of that design. And yeah, that's basically it. So you've got drawing and you've got design. And design is a lot more mental than the physical aspect of drawing, but it's massively going to change the quality of that drawing once it's done. So in the previous video, I talked about abstraction, and abstraction can become part of a design. And it can help you inform your designs. And essentially, that's what abstraction is, or abstract art is an element of design. And especially symbolism is a part of design. Storytelling is going to be part of design. So you don't want to just draw to draw something to look good, like, oh yeah, this thing looks fantastic, whatever, like it's pretty, has flowing hair, wow, flowy hair, whatever, like, ooh, wow, that is amazing. I'm gonna make her eyes really weird. There we go. There we go. She's just so amazed by her own amazing prettiness. Just like, oh my God, wow, this is the prettiest thing ever. Whoa, look at how good I am. Um, you don't want to just create like a design that's just pretty and aesthetic or cute or whatever. Maybe you do. Um, but you want to start thinking about the design as well, so that when you do draw, this has a purpose. This is a point. You know it's in the right position. It's like if you get an actor to portray your role, you don't want that actor just sitting around eating muffins and donuts. You want them doing something cool. And until you have something cool, then the drawing won't matter. And if you do have something cool, the drawing will matter less, because the coolness of the thing that you're doing is also going to be more important. So, super important idea. Understand a little bit of design. Hope that helped. And yeah, I'll catch you guys tomorrow. All right, bye.